If you've been investing $650 a month for the past few years, you've already done something most people never even start. And yet, every time you open your account, it still feels like the scoreboard is broken. You've put in over $23,000 of real money. Fewer trips, less spending, fewer little rewards. And in return, you get a number that grows so slowly it almost feels disrespectful. Meanwhile, someone who hasn't saved a dollar is posting beach photos, drinking cocktails, looking like life is paying them more consistently than it's paying you. If this feeling sounds familiar, you're not alone.
The
According to the
median
survey of
investment
consumer
balance is
finances by the US Federal Reserve,
$45,000.
Americans between
Specifically
the
for
ages of
those aged
35 and
35
44
to
have a median
44.
investment balance of around $45,000, which means most people have never even reached $100,000. Not because they're lazy, but because they quit at the exact stage where progress feels slow, heavy, and deeply unfair. So, what if I told you this phase isn't failure at all, but a mandatory barrier before money starts to accelerate? And what if misunderstanding this stage is exactly why people quit right before everything begins to turn? My name is Mike, and in this video, I'm going to explain why the first $100,000 always feels slow and heavy, and what actually happens right after you cross it. Before we talk about compound interest or the nicer looking numbers that come later, we need to face a truth that's a little uncomfortable. Before $100,000, your money is not actually working for you in the way people like to advertise. At this stage, you are the engine. Let's use a very real example. If you invest about $650 a month, that's $7,800 a year, and let's assume a reasonably healthy long-term market return of about 7 to 8%. In your first year, your investment gains are usually only around $500 to $600. In other words, you put in nearly $8,000 and the market pays you back with roughly the cost of a few decent dinners out. Not because the market hates you, but because the amount of money simply isn't large enough yet to create real impact. Long-term data from major indexes like the S&P 500 shows that the real power of compounding only becomes obvious once the base amount is large enough. Before that, growth looks a lot like disciplined saving, with a bit of luck sprinkled on top. This is why this phase creates the illusion of failure. You're doing the right things, you're consistent, you're patient, but the scoreboard doesn't move. And if you look closely, there's something almost ironic here. Over 90% of the growth in the early years comes from your own contributions, not from any market magic. Put bluntly, at this stage, you're not an investor being rewarded. You're a trainer. You're teaching your money how to stay put, how to tolerate volatility, and how not to run away when things get uncomfortable. Charlie Munger once said that the first $100,000 is the hardest, not because it's a big number, but because you're almost entirely pushing the cart by yourself. So if right now you feel tired, discouraged, or slightly shortchanged compared to people living for today, congratulations. Not because you're winning, but because you're standing in the exact stage where many people quit. And the most dangerous part of this phase isn't low returns. It's believing you're doing something wrong when, in reality, you're doing almost everything right. Why non-investors look like they're winning for a while? There's a frustrating paradox at this stage. When you start investing seriously, you often look worse than people who don't invest at all. Not worse in the future. Worse right now. You set aside $650 a month. That money doesn't disappear, it just doesn't show up in your daily life. No better meals, no new trips, nothing new to show off. Meanwhile, the non-investor has that same money, but uses it to make life look like it's moving forward. A short trip, a new phone, a slightly nicer apartment. And then something very human happens. Your brain starts comparing, not spreadsheets, feelings. You look at your investment account, a slow-moving number, silent, unresponsive. You look at other people's lives, photos, motion, visible proof that they're doing well, and you start asking yourself, am I sacrificing too early? This is where many people quit. Not because they urgently need the money, but because they see no signal that they're winning. The truth is, investing is a terrible game from a marketing perspective. It doesn't produce good photos, it doesn't make great dinner party stories, and it definitely doesn't give you immediate validation. Consumption, on the other hand, is excellent at that. Every purchase gives you a small, instant reward. Your brain loves this a lot. Investing doesn't. It asks you to accept being temporarily invisible. Not because you're losing, but because you've chosen a path that only pays out after enough time has passed. And here's the key point. Non-investors aren't doing anything wrong in the short term. They're simply choosing all the rewards now. You're doing the opposite. You're accepting a phase where effort goes unanswered. Not because you're foolish, but because you're playing a game where the scoreboard only lights up much later. And if you don't understand that, it's very easy to confuse moving slowly with moving in the wrong direction. After $100,000, money starts talking back. There's a very strange moment when you cross $100,000. No fireworks, no congratulatory emails, no one knows except you. But something very real changes. Money starts talking back. Before that, your money is like a very quiet friend. You talk to it every month by transferring money in. It nods politely. And then nothing. But after $100,000, even small market movements start producing numbers you can't ignore. Here's a simple example. A 5% move with $30,000, that's about $1,500. A short vacation, a decent laptop, with $100,000, that's $5,000. A few months of rent or an entire household's living expenses for a while. Same percentage, completely different feeling. This is the first time you see money affect your real life, not just sit quietly inside an app. And something more important happens here. The roles begin to reverse. Before this point, you were putting in about $7,800 a year, and the market was contributing a small, modest amount. After this point, in a completely normal year, your returns can reach $7,000 and $8,000 without working extra hours, without saving more, without trying harder. For the first time, you're no longer the only one pushing the cart. Money starts pushing with you, not aggressively, not enough to retire, but enough that life no longer feels entirely dependent on your own effort. This is also where your mindset changes. You stop asking, did I invest enough this month? And you start asking, what am I actually managing here? That shift matters. It's the transition from someone who's accumulating to someone who's holding and directing capital. And there's a slightly funny detail here. Same person, same habits, same lifestyle. Only one thing is different. Your money finally decides to open its mouth and respond. Not to brag, but to remind you that the years when you felt slightly behind were never meaningless. They were just late. The problem isn't starting, it's never reaching the acceleration phase. If you want to see what really happens when someone never crosses the point where money begins to build momentum, don't look at young people. Look at those nearing retirement. According to long-term U.S. household finance data, the median investment balance for people aged 55 to 64 is only around $180,000 to $190,000. That doesn't sound small, but translated into real life. At a commonly used safe withdrawal rate of about 4%, $180,000 generates roughly $7,200 per year, about $600 per month. That's not retirement, that's being slightly less panicked. What's striking is that most of these people worked for 30 to 40 years. They earned income, they paid taxes, they didn't live recklessly. But their money was never large enough to generate its own momentum. Not because they made one huge mistake, but because they stopped too early, too often. When markets dropped, they invested less. When expenses rose, they paused saving. When life got busy, investing was postponed. Until next year. No single decision looked dangerous. No moment felt like a clear failure. Just one very consistent outcome. They never made it past the flat part where money starts working on their behalf. And the most ironic part is this. Many of these people earned millions of dollars over the course of their careers. Money passed through their hands, but it didn't stay long enough to learn how to multiply. If you've never experienced the moment when money starts talking back, it's easy to believe that compound interest is just a textbook concept. When in reality, it's simply a story that arrives very late and doesn't wait for anyone to come back. $100,000 won't make you rich, It simply determines how many choices you still have when things don't go according to plan. $100,000 isn't a wealth milestone, it's a decision-making milestone. When you don't have $100,000 yet, your financial life runs on a very simple system. Paycheck, okay, a disruption, stressed market up or down, mostly irrelevant. The S&P 500 goes up 10% in a year. With a small account, you read the headline and go back to work. But once you're around $100,000, the market starts participating in your life in a very practical way. In a normal market year of about 7%, your account can generate roughly $7,000. Not enough to brag about, not enough to quit your job, but enough to delay a rushed decision, avoid selling your time too cheaply, or walk away from an option simply because you don't need the cash right now. This is the most important difference and one that very few people explain clearly. $100,000 doesn't change your lifestyle. It changes how pressured you are. Before this point, every financial decision feels mandatory. You have to work more. You have to say yes. You have to endure it. After this point, some decisions start to become optional. Not many, not all the time, but enough that you're no longer always reacting. To put it a little humorously, $100,000 doesn't help you beat the market, but it helps you avoid getting cornered by the market and life at the same time. And the irony is this: many people work for 30 to 40 years and never experience this feeling. Not because they didn't earn money, but because their money went straight from income to spending, never staying long enough to create options. So if we had to say it simply, $100,000 isn't for showing off. It's the first point where money gives you permission to slow down one notch. And for many adults, that alone is already a huge difference. The real lesson of the $100,000 milestone. If listening to this made you feel a little uncomfortable, that's actually a good sign. Not because your future is bleak, but because you're finally looking at it honestly instead of soothing yourself with comforting phrases. The biggest lesson of the $100,000 milestone isn't about the number itself. It's this: money doesn't start helping you when you understand enough. It starts helping you when you stay in the game long enough. The early phase is always slow, always heavy, always feels like effort isn't being rewarded. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because that's the cost of building momentum. Most people don't fail because of one big mistake. They fail because they quit during the phase that gives no feedback. And if you're in that phase right now, investing consistently, feeling like nothing is happening, questioning whether you should keep going, you may not be falling behind. You may simply be standing exactly where many others already walked away. Before you leave this video, do one simple thing. Open your investment account. Look at the total amount you've contributed, not the returns. And ask yourself one question. If I stop right now, what am I giving up over the next 5-10 years? Not today's emotions, but the momentum you've worked hard to build. If this video reflects what you're actually going through, leave a comment saying 100,000. Not to show off, but to remind yourself that you're playing a game that only rewards people who don't quit halfway. And if you want to keep exploring what happens at the next milestones when money truly changes roles in your life, stay with this channel. We're not talking about getting rich fast. We're talking about not breaking right before it's finally your turn.